This is what the musicians do all the time. They're always adjusting their microphones up here. I'm not a musician. Let's see if I can. There we go. Get that. Great. Well, let's see. Let's do a test. Can everybody, Vanessa, make sure everybody online can hear me. We are doing a virtual meeting, so let's just do a little tech check. And I'm going to ask the question, can anybody online hear me? And you're going to let Vanessa know in the chat, because everybody's muted. So maybe no answer there is, you got a yes. Okay, excellent. Thank you. Good. Thumbs up. All right, good evening. I'm Sue Coakley. I chair the Planning Commission. I am joined here by other members of the Planning Commission, including Vanessa Long here, who's taking care of folks online. And we have Phil, otherwise known as Pip Bannister, over here. Will be joining me up on stage. We also have Andrew Morrison will be here soon. He will be a part of our presentation tonight. He's juggling kids and meeting, but he'll be soon. Oh, here he is. Great. Thank you, Andrew. Just introducing you. We also have some members of our zoning bylaw modernization advisory committee that have been meeting with us for a year now. Jim Oliver's in the room, and downstairs is Lisa Chase, who was greeting everybody coming in, and I expect we'll have a couple of more folks will be coming in this evening. So that's who's here. And this is our third meeting about the zoning bylaw modernization, and really in some ways our fourth. We had a meeting in April where we introduced the idea of zoning. We did kind of a zoning 101, and we did an exercise, think like a developer, and what does that mean, and how does it make you think about zoning? We had a focus group, an invited focus group, to talk about the topic we have tonight, a forest block policy concept. At that time, we were talking about an overlay district, and it was a very helpful conversation to inform us about questions and issues that need to be addressed. And then we had another zoning bylaw meeting on the September 30th, where we primarily reviewed the updates that we believe are going forward in stage one, and I'll talk about that more soon. And then this evening, we're talking about the stage two part of the project, which is on a different schedule, which is actually to do more research to recommend, research and assess to recommend a forest block preservation policy for Putney. And I think that is a discovery, and it's very important that we begin with a conversation like this as we lay a research plan to understand the scope of it, ideas of how to make that work well, including public engagement, where we might find information, how to present that information, and so forth. So we'll be talking more about that this evening. I'm doing a little bit of a project overview. Phil will join me up here in a moment for that. And then at 7 o'clock, we'll be moving into a discussion about statewide forest blocks, and I will be inviting Andrew to come up and give a presentation about why forest blocks, and some Q&A about that, looking at the state level policy and what that means for Putney, just in terms of the challenge, what is the need that we're talking about tonight. And then we'll switch by 7:30 to review the draft research plan, which hopefully everybody has picked that up. Does everybody have materials for the meeting today? Do you have an agenda, a research plan, and a participant feedback group? If you don't, there's copies downstairs, and I'm happy to make sure you have them. Okay. So that is my overview, and before we go too much further, I just want to do a shout out thank you to Next Stage for making this facility available, and we'll thank Colin, who is doing our AV up there and managing our Zoom and helping us engage people virtually, being managed here by Vanessa. Okay, so next slide, please, Colin. Let's see if this works. Yeah, that's you. Yeah, thanks. Okay. Oh, you jumped. Go back one. There we go. Oh, I just did that. Okay. I just want to say at the end of the meeting, we have a simple feedback form, and it's an opportunity to provide more comments, and we do invite you to please fill that out. There's a basket up here on the table. We'll be inviting you to put those forms there. We do read them. There are other ways to give us written comments, but that is one way. Okay, next slide, please. So when we set out to do this project, our goals, it really began with implementing the town plan. The town plan had as the number one recommendation through the multiple chapters was to look at zoning and update our zoning for a range of issues. And here you see that it's to remove barriers to housing development, particularly in areas identified in the town plan where that is particularly encouraged, and then protecting natural resources and climate resilience. So a number of things to update that, and that's where forest blocks come in, Vermont Conservation Design, and Andrew will tell you more about that. So those are largely, if you bundle them together, the directives in the town plan that address zoning. We also need to comply with state requirements. We have we're beholden to state law first. I mean, towns can only do what the state allows us to do, being a Dillon state. That is the nature of how policy works. And at the end of the day, if our zoning is not updated to state requirements are the requirement. We do our best to update this, the zoning bylaws. There's lots of things that come up every year. So this time we're doing a comprehensive update to make sure that is done with proper sites and all of that to law. So that's a major effort. And then trying to improve the zoning application and administration process to ease it, to make it simpler and work better for everybody, for the town, for the applicants. So that's been an important goal of this update. And it's looking at not only the zoning bylaws, but also the subdivision regulations, which are our companion, and it's a set. Those are our zoning regulations. So we have decided to turn this project into two sections. Welcome. Hello, Aiden. This just happened in September to shift to have in two stages. We were proceeding to try to do all of that in one effort, but we found that we really do need to have more time for the second part. So we expect that by January we could have a public hearing, and we'll publish draft regulations in December on the housing, the compliance with state requirements, the administrative improvements. That will all be published with 30 days to review it, and then we'll have a hearing. And after the hearing, then the Planning Commission would make a recommendation to the Select Board, who would then have to have their own hearing on a proposed set of zoning reg updates. So at least the Planning Commission plans to be done in January to hand it off to the Select Board. And then we will be beginning as soon as we've wrapped up stage one enough to really dive into the stage two part, which will be about a 9 to 12 month process. We're not sure yet because we haven't really landed on exactly our research scope of work and how we're going to undertake it and what resources we will have available to us to help us. So that is to research and assess a range of policy options to recommend for public hearing next fall as a second update. And so that is really the subject of tonight. This is sort of a starting point to begin to understand what that is. And really the starting point was our focus group in July, where we had a lot of great questions and input, and we're building on that and said, okay, let's just step back and give this the time that it needs. So that is where we are. There are a range of ways to provide public input into the zoning bylaw process. You can attend Planning Commission meetings. This has been on the agenda pretty much every meeting. Most meetings, certainly to the end of the year, are with the Zoning Bylaw Advisory Committee, continuing to advance this, working on specific issues. We meet the first Tuesday of every month at 6:30 when we're meeting with zoning bylaws, so that would be the rest of the year. And for the rest of the year, we'll be meeting at the public library, which has a better audio and AV arrangement, and so we can include more people. So our meetings the rest of the year will be at the library on Tuesday evenings at 6:30, the first Tuesday. We do have members on the ZBM Project Advisory Committee tonight. As we think about stage 2, we're going to begin to think about renewing and creating a new advisory committee for that next process. We only asked the current people to do it for 12 months, and they will have done that. So maybe some of them will re-up, but we're looking for some new voices. Participating in community meetings like this, attending a public hearing. We will have one of those, and so will the select board. And providing written comments. You will see that there's information online about how to send comments to me directly. I have a town address, pcchair@putneyvermont.gov. And we do read them, we do respond to them, and particularly when we get into actual proposed regs, we will actually list them so that they can be seen by everybody what those comments are. So that's a really important process. And there's always, if you have questions, I'm available, happy to meet with you and other members. Sometimes Phil Bannister is able to join me in conversations on topics where that's important. So that is our public input options. Is that the last slide for this set? Yes, back up. Oh, no, yes. Yeah, that's for later. Okay. You can back up. That's perfect. Okay, and I want to now invite Phil up here. We're running very well on time here. Is there anything about how I've talked about this project that you feel that I've just not mentioned that you want to make sure everybody knows about what we've done and where we're going?
No, I think you've covered it. There's a clear emphasis on housing opportunities, increasing those in the village and village residential areas. That's reflected in the regs. That's a kind of significant shift. We've also spent a long time dealing with loose ends, a lot of process minutia that is not that significant to the normal user of the regs. So there's a lot of it that we've done that's boring and of minimal interest to anybody except sort of a zoning geek or someone engaged in the process. But I think the housing issues, increasing the size of ADUs, trying to come up with a thoughtful sort of compromise about Airbnb use in town, one that meets most people's needs, making sure that there are appropriate density levels in those areas of town that can be developed with sewer and water, and less dense development in areas that don't have those same on-site capabilities. But we've gone through the regs and have developed density maximums, recommendations, and lot coverage maximums for the various districts, which we didn't have previously. We had implicit zoning density, but it wasn't explicit. You could get there, but you had to do a little bit of math and figure out what's the maximum that could be developed on a parcel. It wasn't that hard to do, but we've simply extracted it and put it into a table, made it explicit. Those are among the changes that are reflected in the new regs. Yeah.
And I'll just highlight one other thing that I think makes it easier to understand the changes that we've made from a sort of on the ground, member of the community perspective. We created the first ever district use tables. So there's zoning, and believe me, I've been learning a lot because zoning wasn't my background. I've done a lot of regulation, but not land use regulation, so I had to learn a lot. But zoning is done by district and by use, and so we now have district use tables that actually tell you what's allowed. It makes it very simple to look that up and understand what options you have for a parcel of land you may have and what you want to do. And it also makes it easy to see where we've made a lot of things that you can develop by right, essentially. And so you still have to apply for a permit, but it is a permitted use, and the requirements for the application are clear, and so it should be more straightforward. And that's part of the way we're removing barriers to housing. And that is beyond the village and village residential. It's in other areas as well. So I think that's a good overview. We're almost at 7, but let me ask if there's any questions. I'll just say one other thing I forgot to say in my slides is that with housing development is economic development. Many people think of them as the same thing. They're very related. The updates we're doing are making housing and economic development, trying to ease that as well. Some of it permitted by right where it wasn't before, for example. So I just wanted to add that. Any questions from the audience? I'm going to start here with Fletcher.
Just a quick one. Does the zoning regulation have to be approved by the town meeting? Is that part of the timeline?
No, actually, thank you. So the question is, and actually, whenever we ask questions so that Zoom can record this, we need to make sure that there's a microphone down here. Oh, Aiden, that'd be great. Now, I think Fletcher's already asked his question, so I'll just say it, but I'm now getting my muscle ready to make sure the microphone gets around. So, no, it's not required to go to a town vote. It is done actually through a select board approval. So the Planning Commission does its work, its public hearing, makes a recommendation to the select board. The select board then holds a public hearing. And it is possible for you to make changes from what the Planning Commission has done if you felt like you wanted to do that. But every time a substantive change is made to proposed regs by the body that's going to approve it, you have to make sure it's in a hearing. If you try to make a change after the hearing, you need another hearing. So I just wanted to map out what does it mean for the Planning Commission, what does it mean for the Select Board, and we really do hope that by doing 2 stages and by having the communication that we've had, that we should do pretty well at the public hearing. Yes, to Mr. Fairman, please. Let's find out. I think it is.
Yes, it is. Okay, this is just a clarification. When people talk about town water and sewer, they probably know that Putney Central School has town sewer and assume that it has town water. It doesn't. Town water ends just beyond this building going up Kimball Hill. I understand the reason was because they didn't want to blast ledge to bury the water main below the frost line. But anyway, that's the way it is. Town sewer all the way up, but town water just beyond here.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Fairman. And there is a very nice map in the town plan that shows where all the municipal services are in Chapter 8. I believe it's Chapter 8 or 7. I will segue here into the next part by just saying how to support infill development in the village and economic development is a subsequent project. After stage 1 of zoning, we'll be kicking off a comprehensive village plan project, which will look at how can infill development happen, how can that be supported, but it will look at everything that you would want with infill development. It will look at the sidewalks, it will look at safe streets, it will look at landscaping, it'll look at the retail needed to make the village vibrant and a good place to live. So we'll be taking on all those issues. We're forming a project advisory committee for that. You'll see downstairs nomination form is also a scan code, so you can do a nomination online. You can nominate yourself. You can nominate somebody else that you think should be on it. I want to point out Vanessa Long here, who is our project lead for the Comprehensive Village Plan. Nominations are due October 24th. We do have several. We're hoping for more. There's a information sheet, FAQ, downstairs at the table next to the application form, so you could read more about the project and what's involved and how many meetings and that kind of thing. So a little commercial for that, and I hope you will, if not nominate yourself, think of who else might help us create the Putney Village that we know we really want. So, all right, let me welcome Andrew. And now could you please switch Colin to the other?
First slide is a you slide, not an oh, there we go.
Yeah, that was my slide.
Hey, that's pretty fun.
Oh, yeah. I've never been in the movies before, if you'll.
I've moved this over slightly because it looked like Sue was being split by the bright light, and I'd rather not. Is it okay if I also take this off? Can everybody hear me fine? I'm Andrew Morrison. I serve on the Putney Planning Commission, and I gave this a presentation similar to this at our prior meeting regarding forest blocks. At the time, that presentation was actually designed by somebody from our Department of Fish and Wildlife, Jens Hilke, who was going to come and do that presentation, and I ended up pinch hitting last minute. This time around, I was well informed, and so this is quite a modified presentation that reflects a linear train of thought that is much more curated to our town of Putney. And so if you've seen the prior presentation, I think that this will have some of the same concepts but presented in a different manner, and hopefully is not a waste of everybody's time. So if we could go to the next slide, please. So I want to preview with why are we talking about forest blocks at all? And if we go to the next slide, the conversation of forest blocks is not unique to Putney. No, it didn't start with us. It wasn't even necessarily prompted by us. So the conversation really started with a statewide effort called Vermont Conservation Design, which was a statewide process of trying to identify where the forest cover, contiguous forest cover in the state of Vermont was. And then after going through the process of identifying that contiguous forest cover, the state then ranked that forest cover primarily based upon size, but with some other metrics involved around natural communities, and then came up with some broad targets related to what was desirable in terms of keeping Vermont as the Green Mountain state, right? What was desirable in terms of trying to retain forest cover in Vermont. And so forest blocks are areas of natural cover. They don't have roads or development. And so they are also excluding agricultural land, right? That's a manner of development that's not consistent with forests. So our forest blocks work their way around that as well. And you can see just from this map that the Northeast Kingdom and the Green Mountain Ridgeline are the primary bastion of forest block land in the state of Vermont. But Vermont is largely forested outside of the Champlain Valley, including our own little region. And so out of Vermont Conservation Design, there was a state legislative action, which I believe is Act 171, that sent mandate down to towns to say Vermont forest blocks and forest cover should be a concept that is covered in your town plan. And that was sort of the gist of it, right? There was no recommendation on what should be done about it or how it had to happen, but it had to be a section, just like all of the other sections that are in our town plan. We needed to have a section that addressed forest cover and forest blocks. So this sort of brings us to where Putney's role picks up, and the next slide is a zoomed in, but I would note that in this matrix of colors, that's now, you can progress to the next slide, that's fine. So in this matrix of colors that's now statewide, you can see that the region of Brookline, Putney, Westminster is a little bit of a southeastern Vermont hotspot of contiguous forest cover outside of the Green Mountain National Forest. So if we zoom into the town of Putney in this matrix view, we have 3 forest blocks within our community that in this statewide ranking system ranked as highest priority forest blocks. And we have a forest block in our community that is ranked as a priority forest block within the statewide ranking system. So the westernmost forest blocks divided by Putney Mountain Road. North of Putney Mountain Road, there's a forest block that's a contiguous, almost, 12 and a half, a little more than 12,500 acres that stretches northward up into the community of Westminster and Athens, northward towards that Grafton region. And then south of Putney Mountain Road, there is a forest block of closer to 7,000 contiguous acres that stretches down into the town of Dummerston. And then Bear Hill is part of a contiguous forest block that's just shy of 6,000 acres, stretching up northward into Westminster. So those 3 forest blocks have been ranked by the state of Vermont in this Vermont Conservation Design as highest priority forest blocks. And then the 1,100 acres that is south of Route 5 is a priority forest block within that matrix. And I'm realizing that we had a map for potential forest block overlay district, highlighted just those blocks and didn't have some of the other small bits and pieces of forest block overlay, but it's not part of this presentation. So that's to introduce how Vermont Conservation Design, along with Act 171, led to forest blocks being a conversation piece in the recent update we did to the town plan. And within that update process, we held multiple community meetings and heard through those community meetings from members of the Putney community that forest blocks and forest cover were important issues to the town of Putney, and ended up this notion of action steps towards protecting forest cover in the town of Putney ended up within the town plan in multiple sections for the Planning Commission to then pursue and try to take action on. So that's how we get from the statewide process down to why we're talking about forest blocks and why the town of Putney is taking action on this, particularly why the Planning Commission is working on taking action on this. So if we go to the next slide. I don't know that this needs a ton of time spent on it, but we're by no means a Western mill town or a New Hampshire paper mill town, but the community of Putney has quite a large connection to its forest resource. And here I've noted that I've had community members refer to the Forest of Putney as a community member itself. And so within our community, we have, or closely adjacent geographically to our community, we have some small-scale lumber milling that's happening. We have firewood processing. Many of the members of our community use firewood as a heat source for their homes. We have a fine furniture maker in town and quite a number of commercial-scale sugar bushes as well as recreational level. So although we are not some incredible mill town, our community is economically tied, and professionally I'm a consulting forester. My personal economy is tied to forests as well. There's quite a lot of our economy that is still very land-based, and as much as we have a strong orchard and a strong farming presence, there's actually quite a lot of small forest-based economy within our community. It's also a very important tourism resource and recreational resource to our community. You know, we're the home of Putney Mountain Association, Forests for Learning. We have a piece of National Wildlife Refuge, the Silvio Conti National Wildlife Refuge. We're federally held land within our community. And we have a strong legacy of outdoor recreation, particularly Nordic skiing within our community, and trail networks within forests that are supportive of that legacy and history of part of who we are as a community. So, and then there's other sort of aspects of what forests bring to our community. So hunting for recreation, hunting for sustenance, burning. We have wildlife neighbors that are utilizing it, and it's an important resource for flood control, and that shows up elsewhere in our regs. Following Irene, there were a lot of modifications to regs about how do we reduce the potential for another huge flood event within our community. So I just wanted to identify that our forests are a member of our community, and they're really foundational to who we are as a community. We heard that through the town plan process. So next slide. I'll cue you on clicks here. There's going to be a couple of them, but one of the reasons that this then overlaps with the Planning Commission and originally was part of a conversation on zoning and bylaws is because the vast majority of New England's forested land is private. The majority of Vermont's forested land is private. The land that is within the community of Putney that's forested land is private. The decisions that get incrementally made about how that private land is utilized have tremendous impacts upon forests. And we refer to that typically as forest fragmentation, the development of what had been forested land into land that is no longer forest. And we have communities here in Vermont that have experienced this ahead of us, particularly because of ski recreation and ski development and infrastructure. So this is imagery from the town of Dover starting in 1962. And on the next click, we've got forest cover identified here in the shade of green. So then next click, this is forest cover within Dover in 1974. And you can see some of the development decisions dramatically altered the sort of potential future location for development within that previously forest covered land. If we next click, this is 1980 forest cover in Dover. Next click. So those inroads allowed for future development access. This is 1996 forest cover. Next click. This is 2007 forest cover in Dover, which I think might be the most present day. A lot of our aerial imagery was flown in '05. So is there one more click or no? Okay, so this is the 2011. This is 2011, I think, is when the first habitat block mapping happened. And so this is sort of the existing habitat blocks in Dover as identified in this one particular region. And so this is an example of how you can fragment a forest through development patterns is the take-home message here, right? That process is not instantaneous. It happens through 1,000 little paper cuts and decision-making that occurs. So next slide. This is going to be a series of, I want you to look at the timestamps on these. We are not alone in our housing crisis that Putney is experiencing or Vermont is experiencing. Many of our neighboring New England states are experiencing this well. So June 19th, 2025, the scale of Connecticut's housing crisis. Recent analysis for the state found a total housing shortage as many as 379,000 or 100,000 homes. Next click. This is from Rhode Island. 93% of Rhode Islanders agree housing costs are a problem, remain divided on solutions. September 15th, 2025. Rhode Island is actually just finished up a housing plan, which sounds strikingly familiar to what we're dealing with. Next click. This is Massachusetts housing crunch requires more muscular state action, Congressman says, April 3rd, 2025. Facing a critical housing shortage, projected to be a short 250,000 units in the next decade. So in the state of Vermont, if you look at the history in Putney, as a planning commission, we've looked at the history in Putney. There has not been a tremendous request or desire for subdivision. There's not been a tremendous request or desire for building new housing. It is partly how we got to the position we're in at the moment with housing, is a need for additional units because we haven't been building them. But our neighboring communities are also facing housing shortages, and the economics of our community make it a desirable place to relocate to. Combined with some of the other wonderful attributes we have to offer people from outside, including our lovely forest cover, our Vermont education system, and all of those wonderful things that we have available here. So, next slide. I mentioned earlier that the vast majority of the contiguous forest blocks in the town of Putney are on private land. Some of them are on conservation land, so there's public land like the Silvio Conte National Forest, and there's nonprofit land that has a mission focused on forestry, like the Putney Mountain Association, Windmill Hill Pinnacle Association, Forest for Learning, and there's some minor other examples. But really, as part of this process, one of the goals is to affect small-scale shifts in choices because they can matter when it comes to how our development patterns impact the continuity of forest cover. So this is an example of just a hypothetical of two identical little development lots here with modified subdivision and building patterns that change how the outcome is in terms of land use and forest cover. So we can, and this is an example set of language. This comes from Jens Hilk. This was not mine, but roads, driveways, and utilities shall be designed to avoid the fragmentation of identified natural areas and wildlife habitat. So that would be language that could potentially modify landowner decision processes to come up with outcomes that better preserve contiguous forest cover. Next slide. I wanted to, we've talked about Dover. We have talked about statewide kind of metrics, but I wanted to bring it home to Putney. And I have a couple of examples of different patterns of development that have already occurred in Putney, and want to talk to these in terms of the context that they either, if maintaining forest cover is a community goal in Putney, I want to talk to these patterns in terms of their either supporting that goal or detracting from that goal. So we have here a roadway that's passing through a community in Putney, and one pattern of development is for homeowners to build within easy access of that roadway location. And so that pattern of development, which has happened naturally within the community over time, that pattern of development, if it were to continue as development occurred in Putney, reduces fragmentation. It is supportive of that goal of having more contiguous forest cover. A different pattern of development is to build deeper within the forest interior, creating long driveways off of road access into the often upper elevations or interior of a particular lot. And if that pattern of development were carried out across Putney, that would increase fragmentation within our forests and would detract from that goal of having contiguous forest cover. We go to the next slide. This is a much broader overview of Putney. And what we're looking at here is that one of those westernmost forest blocks. This is a highest priority block. And you can see in this particular view of Putney that once you remove some of those other ancillary forest blocks, so there is quite a lot of the town of Putney that is not overlaid by forest blocks of significance. But looking at this pattern of development within Putney, we have existing road infrastructure that is there and people are building along it. And then there are some outlying development that are sort of in the heart of what is otherwise contiguous forest blocks. So there's sort of a satellite up above me right here. There's this sort of satellite development pattern that occurred. And so what I want to highlight here is that when we have development that is within close proximity to existing development. That often supports the goal of reducing fragmentation of forests. And when we have development within our community that is far afield of prior existing development, that is often development which increases fragmentation of our forests. So that's another pattern, another decision-making metric that can either support or detract from that broad goal. So this shade of purple is different because this is the priority forest block as opposed to the highest priority forest block. And you can see that I've got parcel lines turned on this time around. This lot is a little less anonymous than the others. And I did that because one of the changes we've made, actually I don't know that it's a change. This is what you would consider planned residential development, or a PRD, although it was not billed as such in its construction. And I forget, Pip, I believe we made some changes within the most recent bylaw revisions to encourage PRDs or to allow for PRD development. So planned residential development is where within a single lot, multiple homeowners could cluster their development and then retain contiguous forest cover. So this is an example where there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 homeowners who have clustered their development on this 100-acre-ish lot, and then the remaining region of that lot is retained as contiguous forest cover. And planned residential development like this is a development pattern that can sort of strike a balance between typical patterns of development and or a more typical subdivision style pattern of development and a pattern of development that retains additional forest cover. So next slide. So as we go forward as a community, over the process of this upcoming program, we're going to be having conversations as a community about what do we want Putney to look like into the future, particularly with regard to the role that forests play within our community as a member of our community. And then the secondary piece of that question then is, how is that achievable within our community in a manner that's respectful and equitable and achieves those goals? So that's, I hope that this has laid out a framework for why Putney has a role within protecting forest cover within the state of Vermont, why Putney has a role in protecting forest cover within our own community for the values that it brings to our community, and then an understanding that as individuals within this community, we have power of choice around how our decisions can impact that forest cover. And then as a community, we have to have a conversation about what's the best way to achieve those protections, to what degree do we want protections, and how do we achieve those protections within our community in a way that's works for all of our community members. So that's what I have for a presentation. Yeah, I'm happy to take questions. And from here on, yeah.
It should be recorded.
Andrew, thank you. It was a nice presentation. Feels like there's a little piece missing, which is sort of the prelude that those of us who have seen Jens's talks, et cetera, know, which is what's the value of contiguous forest blocks? You talked about sort of an economic and community spirit, outdoor activity. But there also is a view that Vermont Conservation Design had, I think, about resilience and this assumption that the wildlife corridor element of it is also has some merit. I don't know whether you feel like talking about it, but I think it's a strong aspect of it.
Yeah, and it's a good prompt actually that there's one more slide here, but we don't need to advance there just yet. we are, as humans, living within the New England ecosystem, and all of us are facing challenges. Our forests are facing tremendous challenges, from insect pests like hemlock, woolly adelgid, emerald ash borer. We're facing novel pathogens. We've got ash yellows. We have beech bark disease. There's a nematode that's been identified, now being called beech leaf disease, that's modifying our forests. And the list seems to grow every time that I attend a conference on forestry. Some of us have experience with jumping worms within our soils, doing soil degradation. And all of us as a community are facing some of the effects of a changing climate. And so our natural communities are facing all those threats. I should throw into those threats invasive plant species, and I should throw into those threats the impacts of deer browse. And so our forest communities are facing a lot of significant stressors, and the more contiguous regions of forests are retained, the better they are as ecosystems able to cope with those stressors. It allows for movement and migration. It allows for the natural processes to retain connected and intact, and it reduces some of the human-driven vectors for things like invasive plant species, invasive insect pests, earthworms, and some of those other variables that are impacting our forests. So yes, there's significant stability advantages, ecosystem stability advantages to retaining blocks of contiguous forest cover. And we all benefit from those ecosystem services, be it flood control, be it sustenance, be it recreation, be it temperature dampening. Those are all services that our forests are providing to us as human beings on this planet. So the next slide is actually, and there's a lot of information here, including registration links, but the Agency of Natural Resources, Fish and Wildlife is doing their own webinar series. There's 2 different sessions happening about using overlay districts to protect connecting habitat. I know as a Planning Commission member, I will be attending the Friday session. I believe Sue has encouraged all of us as Planning Commission members to attend these, but they may also be of interest to individuals within the community to know this is one way that the state is clearly thinking about this process and problem, and they're having a webinar session on it. So if you're interested, if you access these materials online, and this presentation is part of those online meeting materials, the registration links will actually work, and that could be a useful way to be able to get information on this. Sue.
So, okay. And I'll just mention, thank you, Andrew, and this excellent presentation, but these, this is the same webinar that's being done on these 2 dates. So if you can't get there this Friday, you can do it November 18th. And I was very encouraged to see the state offering this, because there hasn't been, to my knowledge, this kind of discussion as we all are trying to figure out what do we do, what makes sense for a rural community like Putney and so many others in Vermont. So this is the beginning of a conversation led by A&R that I think is very helpful, and we'll be encouraging them to do more of this, because we all have a lot to learn about how to do this.
There's a gentleman right behind you, Aiden.
I think it would be very useful if you could, so when you show the overlay, especially at Putney, saying like where the developments were, the dates when they're developed. Because I'd like to get the sense of, the impending stratification of the forest versus do we really have, because I understand putting up Dover is like, it's pretty anomalous in the state. There's only so many ski resorts, and I'd be really curious if the town of Dover is going to do this. I just want to make sure if we're going to do something like this, definitely going to affect my property. If we really actually have a pressure, you know, if there's this, you know, at the last meeting we went to, talking about the number of permits for housing that have been pulled in the past 20 years, and it's minuscule. So, you know, I mean, you talk about a forest. I mean, I know you showed it 1970. What was the forest here in 1900? You know, there's a lot less forest. So, yeah. So I just,
where Putney Mountain was bare.
I would really like to see timelines on all the housing, like when we show something, because if it's like, look at this, you know, look at this piece that's breaking it up, that was done in 1972, and then you have another one 25 years later. I don't want to piss all my friends and neighbors off putting a regulation up that doesn't need to happen for the town of Putney. I mean, we're all for forests, you know. I mean, this is why a lot of us moved up here. So I understand what you're doing. I believe your heart is in the right place, 100%. But, you know, there are some real economic consequences if we do what you're talking about.
Yeah, so first I want to address that the Planning Commission has a recognition that there's real economic consequences, and it's part of the reason that this is a phase 2 and hopefully is a large part of ongoing conversation as we go through this process. And use the phrase like, my heart is in the right place, and I appreciate that, but I think also this is not, I'm up here doing this presentation, but I'm doing this presentation as a Planning Commission member who heard from the community of Putney that this was something that was worthy of being in the town plan, right? That's what has driven this process. So it's not something that's coming from, I think I'm standing behind the microphone today because amongst the members of the Planning Commission, my job as a consulting forester puts me in close connection with an understanding of forests and also the skill set to deal with some of the mapping GIS stuff. But this isn't something that I'm presenting to you all as my idea of what I think should happen in the community of Putney. And so I just want to be clear about that. And it also helps me not take some of the, I don't take any of the comments personally. So there is that as well. Putney, you are correct in saying that Putney does not have a lot of recent development pressure. I think in the concept of any kind of potential problem, the time to think about it is before it's a critical issue, right? So I do think that we have an opportunity now to, as a community, have what I hope can be like a level-headed and fairly cool conversation about, is this something that is critically important to us? How are we going to achieve it? What are the consequences of that for individual landowners? What's the consequence of that for the whole community, et cetera, in a situation where we don't feel like we have a crunched timeline in which it has to occur, right? Where suddenly the, folks from Connecticut, Massachusetts, et cetera, who also are facing housing shortages are pulling permits, we're seeing increased subdivision, et cetera. So that would be my argument for why this would be the time to have this really sensitive, touchy, controversial, complicated conversation as a community, rather than do it down the road. Some of the development that is currently, if you look at the forest blocks and you look at development patterns, some of the development that has fragmented forest blocks happened prior to zoning. Some of that fragmentation happened prior to the current iteration or any iteration of Act 250. And so there are anomalous development patterns within our forest blocks that under current zoning and under Act 250 wouldn't be replicated today. So that is, those act as floodgates. I don't know what the correct term is, but there are protections in place to prevent some of the fragmentation patterns that happened in the past. The use value appraisal program is also somewhat new into this context, right? And so that is something that also acts as a floodgate to put a damper on the desire to turn forests into developed land versus retaining it as forest cover. Both of you brought up the fact that Putney used to not have a lot of forest at all, right? There's like 3 or 4 significant patches of Putney forest that predate sheep clearing and that sort of era. And an important notion about that era of sheep and dairy clearing that happened across all of southeastern Vermont is that that conversion was to something that later was abandoned and could turn back into forests. When we turn something from forest into houses, it doesn't turn back into forest later on because of some period of abandonment, the same way that pasture land did when that reversed. So there is sort of longitudinal data and graphs that show that the losses and gains in forest cover we had in the last 80 to 100 years were largely driven by agriculture. But when you look at the current dip in forest cover within the New England states, that new dip in forest cover is happening because of permanent conversion away from forest into housing and other development patterns. So you're not going to have a secondary period of abandonment with that, where that comes back to forest cover. And the forests we have today, as somebody who works professionally in forests and walks through them all the time, the forests we have today are a shell of their former selves because of their young age and because of that history of clearing. So it wasn't without consequence. Did I manage to hit? There were quite a number of, oh, no, your primary question was it would be really helpful to see dates on this. And I guess my response to that would be that the way that this process ends up happening is like death by 1,000 paper cuts, right? And if no one had an impetus to develop their land, then imposing a strict regulation on it would be a no-brainer for anybody because it was of zero consequence, right? If you weren't planning on subdividing or developing or doing anything that could reduce forest cover, then everybody here would be saying, well, sure, let's do it then. Let's put some really restrictive thing on how my land is used to retain my forest cover, right? But I think the implicit opposite of that is that for all the landowners, there is the possibility that in the future it could be developed, it could be divided, it could be, right? And so it's that potential future thing that is being asked to be protected is the very... Sure. That's where that asset... But you're saying... Put all of our... Right, but I think what you're saying to me is like, why should we even be pursuing this if there's not a threat of development? But at the same time... Yeah.
Forest block proposal that has significant limitations on what you can do for 46% of the land in Putney is affected by this forest block.
Do you want to open this for conversation? There's a number of hands up, so I'm just going to do a little process check. There is this debate about whether or not we need to do it. And partly the debate is if we did something, what is the right thing to do? And I think that's where we want to dive into actually more learning. These are good questions. That's why we're here. You asked great questions like this, you and others, at the meeting we had in July. We said, okay, let's rethink all this and step back. So we actually don't know the answer right now. I'm not sitting to say, I know how we're going to solve this problem. Do we put an overlay district on the table? And we got a lot of questions. Well, how would this work? How do we know a lot of things about it? And then we stepped back and said, why do we even know that that's the right policy? right? That might not even be the right thing to do. And I'll also acknowledge that the large forest block parcel landowners right now have done a lot to manage and take care of land. So how do we partner together? What are the ways we can achieve this protection into the future? And there's always going to be this balancing with how that changes the economic value of that land. But the economy is not only a personal economy, as Andrew was talking about, how these things affect you personally because your income is related to forestry. But there's the larger economy of our community that assumes that there's a forest here, and if the forest is gone, it would really be different. I'm not sure our economy would be as vibrant, and certainly not the Green Mountain economy, why we're here. So this is a conversation we don't know the answer to yet. And that's why we want to do this research plan. It really needs to be, as you're saying, what's the problem? How do we know it's a problem? And Andrew's saying, we don't need the problem to be already a fire in Putney. We need to keep the fire from happening, so to speak. But it's right at our doorstep because of the pressures everywhere. We can't ignore that.
Is it right at our doorstep?
Well, I think
That's-
let's not figure it out here.
We're not going to figure it out tonight.
Really good questions, and we need to have.
Right.
we'd like to-
That's the point. We want to go to the research.
Of what the issues are, what are the questions? It's a great question. Oh, yeah, but just because of time pressure, and we did have a grand plan here to try to break into smaller groups to sort of extract this information. So I don't know where you are in the process, but I keep thinking, yes, great question, let's put it on the list. Yes, great question, all of these issues, the percentage, the impact, the rationale why, we need to do all of that research. So what we were hoping here tonight was to get the beginning of the big list of the issues a little clearer for us as planning commission members. So yeah, keep all those things.
And would it be more helpful than rather than trying to get caught up in all this, but for all of us to sit down and develop a list of here are the concerns, here are the questions,
Well,
and present it
that
to
is-
the group? Here's a group of
Yes, thank you. And my problem is I'm supposed to be recording every word, so I want to hand you a microphone. But that's exactly what we're here for. We heard you in July. There's now a research plan here that reflects the questions that we heard. This is just a scope of work. This isn't even a work plan yet. This is saying, if we were to learn, what are we trying to learn about? And there's a set of objectives, and I want to go over this with you in a few minutes, because this is a draft, and we're not going to commit resources or try to put a schedule together or how we're going to do it until we're sure we have the questions right. So we will want, I talked about written comments earlier. Yes, we do want written comments, but we also want to have a discussion today. Here's a research plan. What about this makes sense? What of this needs strengthening? What's missing from this? I'm getting into what the work will be. Where can we find information? What type of analysis will we do? How do we engage the public? How do we present information? What's useful? We have those questions for you to talk about tonight, and it's probably even more than we could answer all in the now half hour that I think we'll have to do it. But we're not ending here. We just really wanted to say, we heard you. We heard our whole community, not just the people, the landowners. We heard the whole community that this matters. So we need to study it and learn together. Now I'm going to allow Meg Mott back here. I'm going to give her, and I know, Mr. Fairman, you have a question, but we only have 3 minutes before we have to break into groups so we could actually do the work, if we can tonight. Hold on, I've got to give you the mic.
All right, thank you, Sue. Yeah, the key part that I saw there on, now I've taken off my glasses, I can't read, I think it's number 5, assess. I think Benji's question and what I'm hearing from others is how is this assessment going to work? And what are the sort of questions? I know for myself, it would be super helpful if I had some sense from other communities in Vermont how they were making these assessments. I also get worried sometimes, any town that's working hard on a single issue, the people who care about that issue come together, they talk to each other, they figure out what the right answers are. I'd love to see more dissent. So I was glad to hear from Benji and others to say, like, wait a minute, is this really necessary? These are the sort of questions that we'll need in order to do proper assessments. So anything that the Planning Commission can give us about assessments, like how are you going about this process to determine what are the trade-offs, what are the balances that have to be presented to the voters, is going to be helpful.
Thank you very much, Meg. And Mr. Fairman, I'm going to give you a moment, but we're going to have to really move on to our groups here, because we do want to at least get some input from you today on a draft research plan, which you may not like. To Meg's point, it's okay to say this isn't quite what we had in mind, or we don't think this is adequate, but you could also tell us what you think about it might be useful.
Madam Chair, I'll be brief and quick. First, the question of government regulation of land use versus private property rights, that's covered in general under the legal topic of eminent domain. Google eminent domain, scroll down, you'll soon find a posting from the Cornell University Law School, which will tell you all that you really would like to know about eminent domain in plain English. Second, cluster development. There are three excellent examples of cluster development in Putney. The intentional communities, the one way up Route 5, the one just across the street from us next to Christian Square, and where I live at Putney Landing. Third, the comparisons to Putney actually are invalid. Connecticut, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island are the most populous states after New Jersey. Vermont, on the other hand, is the second least populous state after Wyoming. And comparing to Dover, Dover is the seat of, we're actually talking about West Dover, which is the seat of Mount Snow. If you're up in the Grand Summit Hotel, as I have been on a winter's evening, and you look across the valley, it looks like a city. There are thousands of second homes and condos in Dover. There never will be anything like that in Putney. You actually should have compared us to other towns in Vermont, because that is other towns in Vermont that are not mountain resorts like Stowe, Killington, and Dover, because and also Winhall and Stratton, because Putney will never be like them. Thank you.
Thank you, Howard. And I'm glad we're recording this so that we can make note of those. So I am going to, let me just raise a hand. Do people want to be in discussion about the research plan? Raise your hand if you'd like to be in discussion about the research plan. Yes? Great. That's why we're here. I mean, we could just, I try to take a pulse of the group. So I find it helpful to break into smaller groups because more people can talk. We want to hear from everybody. And so let's see, I think we can do 3 groups here, and we're going to have one also on Zoom. So how many people? We have 4 people. So Vanessa's going to manage that as a group. So we're going to have group 1. Let's see, now I have to have my instructions. Where is, oh, there. Can you give that piece of paper? Thank you. So we're going to have 3 groups in this building and 1 online. Group 1 is going to be here in the dance floor, and we'll invite people to put their chairs together and have a conversation. I'm going to invite Jim and Pip, if you would be the facilitators for that one. Don't move yet, because I have to give the instruction for all of it. Group 2 will be the Zoom online, and group 3 is going to be downstairs in the community room by the couches. You'll know when you get down. That puts you closest to the cookies and the cider, I should just note. And then very close to the cookies and cider is the cafe area, which will be group 4. There's a bunch of cafe tables. You can put chairs and tables together to have a group there. For group 3, Andrew, yes, I think you always get the couches. No, not always. Oh, you always got that back room at the other couches. Andrew and let's see, who else is here from our group? Lisa, if the 2 of you could be down by the community room and the couches, and I will be joined by, who else is here? From our commissioners are not here. Right. Well, what will we do? I'll do it solo, and I'll ask somebody to help me with note taking. That's what I'll do, because I can't run a meeting and not have a note taker. So, now, how to divide yourselves up. Help me out here. I think it's really good for you, for everybody, to sit with people maybe you haven't talked with before. Make that a goal. And that we have the range of voices in the 3 different groups of different perspectives. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to count off, because I find that is a simple way to get it done, and it will count to 3 because the people online are already counted. So, Mr. Fairman, we'll start with you. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. Sorry, I already can't count. 1, 2, 3, 4. No, 3. 1. Now you get to be 1. Then 2. Then 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2. Did we get you? You need to depart. Oh, I'm sorry for that. I think we have, and Aiden, you can be a 3. Okay. Yeah. So the 3s are going to be down in the cafe area. The 2s are going. The 3s will be in the couch area. The 4s will be in the cafe area, and 1s are here. And we're going to be done with this conversation at 8:10. You'll hear the discussion questions. I was going to put them up, but I think you'll hear them in each group. Everybody has a list, and they're right here, Andrew. Let's see. Here's your packet. And a pen. Yes, I have some downstairs. There's a bunch downstairs.
Hey folks, this is Vanessa. I'm gonna unmute you or ask you to
This is number
unmute.
1.
Looks like Jesse has left us. Can you hear me?
Hey there.
Hi, I can hear you.
This is my brain.
Hold on just
And I'm gonna see if I can figure out
All right.
how to turn up Sue's volume. Can one of you, Kristen or Peg, say something? See if I can hear you.
Hi, this is Kristen.
Hey, Kristen, thanks for joining us.
Sure.
Peg, are you there too?
I am here. Yeah.
Awesome. Did both of you get a chance to take a look at the draft research plan?
I don't have it, no.
Okay. Let me see if I can find it quickly and plant it in the chat.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah. I think that would be helpful too.
Yeah, they might too too close to you, Vanessa.
I think it's okay. We are. I don't know. Well, I guess we'll see. Don't get too rowdy. Let me see. Planning Commission.
This one.
Sorry about this.
Vanessa,
Yes.
do you know what the plan is? I mean, would you be able to summarize it for us?
Well, the plan is to, I got it here. So
Just because I'm not going to be able to read it on my phone here.
that makes a lot of sense. So the kind of, I'm just gonna, sorry, doing too many things at once here.
Yeah. Me too.
All right. So the short of it is that the forest block overlay piece is we've decided to kind of do that as a stage 2 of the zoning bylaws modernization. And so the research plan is really, it's designed towards what are we looking for the forest block process and outcomes. Because I think that we really heard that the forest block overlay as we had originally presented it or been thinking about it was we didn't have enough information to really do it well for people. So that's really what it's oriented towards. So this is a draft research plan that we've kind of come up with since the last community meeting. I'll just read the purpose is provide the information needed for the commission, the community, and the select board to understand the impacts, costs, and benefits of adopting land use policies that meet the 2023 town plan objectives to preserve and protect the integrity of Putney state identified forest blocks in balance with housing, economic development, climate resilience, sustainability, and quality of life objectives. So I think that what we're really looking for right now is input on the development of the research plan. And so we do have some questions, so for example, we're looking for input on where to find information, potential research partners, how to engage affected landowners and other interested community members, how to present and share information, learning and recommendations to the community. And of course, we're looking for people who might be interested in serving on the Forest Block Overlay Project Advisory Committee as well. So that was a lot of information.
Yes. But this is really something that is an outcome of a plan that's already been approved and you're talking about something that was in 2023, that part of the town plan, or
yeah,
I don't want to use the wrong word, but this is fulfilling something that was already declared something that needs to be done.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And really the question is how, and we're kind of like past the why part. Is that, I know there are people there who are saying like why, but it seems to me like we're past that, right?
I don't know. I think that's a good question. I'm not sure we're past that. I think
Okay.
people would say, oh, we're absolutely past that. But
Yeah.
I think other people would say, I'm not convinced,
I see.
is
Okay.
what we've heard.
Yeah,
So,
that's what it sounded like tonight.
yeah. So that's a good question, is the why, really, right?
What part of it? Yeah. It seems like more conversation about the benefits. I don't know. It seems like the benefits to the environment are super clear. To the ecosystem, I think what we need to focus on more, and it sounds like we need more research on, are the benefits to the community. But I'm not sure whether we're going to, I heard people saying, well, what other, what towns do we compare ourselves to? But in some ways, I feel like we're in a process that I don't know that other towns have completed this process. And if they have completed it, if there's been enough time, we're in an environmental moment in that, I don't think we're going to get perfect examples of, case studies of towns
Right.
that made this decision and have had time to, assess the value. I mean, I just don't know that that's really what this challenge presents to us,
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like it's, part of it is more an kind of ethical decision, a moral decision, an environmental decision that we're not going to have all the answers to.
Well, I don't actually know either one of you in person, but I wanted to say why I'm on this call tonight, and that is I'm on the board of the Putney Mountain Association, so I do have a clear interest in conservation and preservation. I'm also, my husband and I bought a parcel of land here on West Hill a couple of years ago. It's 37 acres, most of it's forest. And so I feel like I'm coming on from two different directions as a landowner and as somebody who's deeply interested in conserving as much as possible.
Mhm.
Thank you for sharing that. So when you think about, for example, your parcel of land, which would sounds like it would be one that would be impacted, what would you want to know about a forest block overlay that would make you either support it or, what would be, I guess, what would you want to know about it in terms of how it would impact your land?
Yeah. Well, it's really interesting actually, because we are in the very early stages of wanting to build an ADU for my mother to come and live on this land. And right now we're thinking of clustering all the buildings together. I don't know that that would impact. I think, when is it Andrew who put up the two different examples of how you can put in housing? I don't know that that would apply to us because it is just one parcel, but we are planning to have everything kind of pretty close together, and the forest is not going to be affected in any way whatsoever. But I do want to know how that is going to be balanced, how developing, allowing for ADUs, making it easier for ADUs, or we're not interested in subdividing because we don't want this to go beyond, we want this to stay a large parcel. But having ADUs and other development will ease the housing situation. The easier, the fewer barriers there are to it, the easier it is to say, okay, well, yeah, my mother is going to live there now, but then at a certain point it can become a rental property where somebody can live, thereby easing in that small little way this crush of needing housing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great question. So how will developing on your property be impacted by the potential forest block overlay? I can tell you in the initial draft regs, which we've so far sidelined for the forest block part so that we can do this research first. The proposal was to keep development within a 2-acre envelope and to not permit roads or driveways more than 500 feet from the original road.
Okay.
Yep, with the understanding that anything else would go before a development review board, in which case then it could be approved or declined.
Right.
But was subject to a hearing. So that was kind of the initial proposal. And that's been sidelined for now because people want more information.
Yeah.
And Peg, I think I heard you say some good stuff too about needing more conversation about the benefits. So benefits to the community comparing to other towns. I'm interested to hear you say a little bit more about what kinds of benefits you're talking about.
Well, I don't know. That's what I think the research needs to kind of unpack a little bit. But I had another question as you were talking about, whether that there'd be a certain amount of development that would, like the cluster development, that would be allowed, but if there were something that had a longer driveway or whatever, it would have to go to the DRB.
Right.
So I guess my question would be like, what would the DRB use then as their criteria for permitting, development? So
Yeah.
um
And I don't know because I'm not on the DRB. That's a question for Pet.
right, but it seems like that would be important because if we just say that, if the DRB doesn't have any clear guidelines, then I'm not quite sure. Yeah, I think that's an important thing to understand.
Yeah. I'm just going to write that down. I'm kind of doing triple function here of taking plus facilitating plus,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay. Um, landowners who appeal overlay. Rex. Okay. Yeah, yeah. And so what I'm hearing is the benefits of conserving the forest, which that, I don't feel like we really got into it in this meeting yet so far, but in previous meetings, there have been some pretty kind of extensive discussions about like water conservation in particular and how the forest blocks really preserve water for all of the downhill communities. And so if we're talking about, developing the village more densely, we need the forest blocks to be able to continue to provide clean, safe water to village residents, for example,
Right. Okay.
and to support additional housing and to support safe flood corridors too
Mm-hmm.
for those village residents. But we didn't even talk about that tonight.
No, but that's really interesting to think. I mean, Putney itself is such a small town, but to think that there are different, there's Putney Village, and I hadn't really thought about it, like us being like the out of towners supporting the development that's happening there, not just like supporting it like I believe that there should be development, but also that these natural resources are supporting it as well.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And not just in that sense, like the mountains and the forest as a sponge for
Mhm.
conserving water for the community,
Yep.
but also then for wildlife and wildlife corridors too. And
Exactly.
especially when you're thinking about that Bear Hill to Warden Road kind of access corridor for wildlife to the river, to the Connecticut River,
Mhm.
versus the benefits of housing development and how important that is, to your point.
Yeah.
Yeah, Kristen, that's really important too, because I live on Putney Mountain Road, and I was talking to a Banning Road neighbor not too long ago, and they were saying, they're in the process of developing their land for living up there. And they're like, and we wanted to do X number of tiny houses too for, people that needed housing, and we learned we couldn't do that in the current zoning. And
That's
so
on Banning Run. Is that property that's for sale now, or is that something else? There's like
something else.
okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because my understanding is that type of, that that this forced overlay allows for things like what you're talking about your ADU, or what they're talking about with tiny houses, that are clustered. I mean, what it's really preventing is subdividing big chunks of land and putting in roads, right? Putting in drive.
Right.
And so it's a particular type of development that would be limited. And so I think getting clearer and being clearer about which types of development would and would not be permissible with a forest block overlay would be really important. And your question about like where to do the research, like who.
That was my next question. I was going to come back to that.
Yeah, who can help? I don't know. I mean, and it just seems, I mean, like, I don't know. I mean, it's just that some people who have bought their land and who are invested in the investment that they have in their land and its potential subdivision for their kids or for future sale,
Yeah.
it will not, that won't be an option, so, um, I don't know. I don't know. It's such a dilemma, such a
Yeah.
dilemma. That
Here's another
inevitable that
question.
we're going to have a set of people who are going to be super unhappy about that, about a forest overlay. I don't see how you can not.
Do either of you have a sense of like how many parcels we're talking about that you would think would be upset by this? Like how many big parcels are there that could be subdividable if there wasn't an overlay?
It's not just big parcels, it's little parcels too. Um, and I don't want to say a number, because then I'll be wrong, but for some reason, the number 143 affected landowners
Okay.
is what sticks out in my mind. We
Mhm.
did send a notice to all available landowners in July, inviting them to that July meeting.
Mhm.
And that's kind of where we got the first set of feedback of, oh, we need to step back and do some more research on this.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I wasn't at that meeting. I mean, clearly you had people like Benji who were not enthusiastic about it, but did you have people who would be impacted that were supportive? Was there?
I think that there's a sense that people, are supportive of protecting the forest, but don't necessarily want to compromise their own, personal agency when it comes to their property.
Mhm.
And so it's definitely,
Very Vermont, right?
yeah, totally. There's also a lack of clarity too about how it would happen. And even the mapping, frankly, Peg, is not great. Like, so there's from the state, there's a couple of different maps. One which has parcels identified, but then it like draws the forest plot kind of right through the middle of the parcels. And then another one which includes the entire parcel. So when you're talking about like the 500 feet, is that from the beginning of the forest block in the split parcel, or is it from the road? And, it's not clear. So that's just all to say that I'm not sure that the resources are terribly great also. Um, so one question you said about there's going to be people who will be mad no matter what. So part of the goal of this research is to engage affected community members and landowners. Any ideas about the best kinds of ways to do that?
Well, beyond these meetings, I think I feel like this is the way to get those diverse opinions out. There's really no other way to do it than to have people in a room together. And I'm trying to remember if we got this notice in July. I don't remember it, but that doesn't mean I didn't get it, but I did not go to the meeting. But I think that this is very useful.
Great.
I also think as somebody who owns property in the village, I think it's really important to engage the village dweller as well as the forest block overlay folks, and for there to be some more information, like you were saying, about the benefits to the village as well as the disadvantages to the forest block overlay owners.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because if
Yeah.
it has to, it has an impact on our water system, that's some, so I guess thinking about the impacted people as not just the folks in with the larger pieces of land in the forest.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree with that completely, because I mean, I didn't make that connection until tonight, so hopefully I'm not the only one that didn't make that connection, but you're absolutely right that that you are as big a stakeholder as the people with the parcels.
Right.
Uh, Jesse, I noticed that you managed to jump back on. I don't know how much of this you've been able to hear, or if you have anything that you'd like to say about the proposed forest block preservation land use policy research plan and how to engage community members, as I know that you are a landowner up there as well. And if not, that's okay. Okay, let me just,
On mute.
yeah.
Area which forth is in now is the conservation zone, which is all of it fairly substantial.
So in addition to community meetings, do you have any ideas about the best ways to present and share research information? I think that a lot of times with this kind of work, there's so much information, and you get to a point when you're presenting it with the community where it's too much information and people just react, they're not really
Yeah.
kind of thinking or listening anymore. So are there ways that are there ways or suggestions that you have for how best to keep the community engaged and informed in this process?
Do you ever do publications like not a newsletter, but like something that would go out to everyone that would have the concept of the overlay and like the cascading effects of it? I guess I'm just saying like a public mailing or that would land in everybody's mailboxes.
Okay, that's a great idea. I know that we have the town website, but
Yep.
speaking from my own experience, that can be challenging to dig through sometimes.
I had a lot of trouble tonight actually trying to figure out how to get it. It didn't happen right away.
Yeah.
Better, a lot better than it was a couple years ago.
So I love the idea of like a regular newsletter or public mailing or some way to engage both kind of physically. And of course that needs funds, right?
Yeah, of course. Right. That's why I was like, meetings are great. You just need to get the people to show up.
And then also virtually too. I mean, like an email newsletter. is
Oh
great
yeah.
as
Yeah.
well.
Of course.
I wonder how many different neighborhood groups there are around Putney,
Oh, that's interesting.
I know like we have a neighborhood group and, kind of the Spring Hill neighborhood group. And I know that there's a neighborhood group on the Friendship Loop neighborhood group. And I'm sure there's a bunch of those kind of informal neighborhood groups around.
Yeah, I suppose we have one too. I think it started during COVID, like neighbors helping neighbors. So that sort of thing.
Yeah. And I just wonder how much like engaging with those groups would be helpful,
Can I ask, this might be a totally naive question, but how do you normally engage in those groups?
potlucks.
Okay, but how do you know that
Okay.
there's a potluck?
People call around or send texts or
Okay.
The only thing I'm aware of again, we're like just on West Hill, but it's an email group
yeah.
Okay.
that I recently got added to. I got added to sometime this year. But I mean, I don't know of any more formal. That's the only thing that I'm part of. So I don't know if there's more formal or informal listservs or WhatsApp groups or however people communicate.
I love that idea of neighborhood groups.
Yeah.
Well, I just wonder, because I think that neighborhoods are impacted in particular ways by this, right? Um, so it might be, I don't know, it just might be an interesting, more informal way. I don't know, it's a lot of work too. So I don't know. The planning commission's doing so much work already. I don't know that I would add more to your plate, but
Well, that's where we would really lean on a project advisory committee. So, if you have any recommendations of folks that you think might be good fit, or, it would be nice to have a neighborhood representative from each neighborhood on the project advisory committee, or many of them. That, and then also the comprehensive village plan project too. And of course, I don't think that we have any real plans yet for the project advisory committee for this project, for the forest block, just because this is really brand new in terms of where it is in the stage. But yeah, keep that in mind. If you know anybody that you think would be a good project advisory committee member.
Well, the problem is all those people are so overtaxed already. All the really good people are, busy already. So it's a hard ask.
so I guess, are there any other ways or systems or processes that allow for the goal of maintaining forests, and contiguous forests, other than the overlay, the forest overlay and zoning,
So alternatives.
Yeah,
Talking about alternatives.
are there alternative systems, that
Great
can,
question.
that might work? I don't know. I don't know because I don't own a big chunk of land. So I don't know what all the systems are that allow for conservation and, yeah.
It's a great question. Putting it on the list.
So, where we need to end.
What is going to happen next in this meeting?
In this
The
meeting,
groups are going to be back, or
I just heard the other group say that it's about time for us to reconvene. So I think that we're going to reconvene and then do a short presentation of each group's discussion.
Okay.
And then next steps, I'm sure.
all right.
Yeah, which I think that the next steps are going to be, so there's the stage 1 of the zoning bylaws modernization project, which I think, Kristen, your question about the ADU development is actually addressed in that
Yes.
version. And the goal was to make it easy for you to build an ADU. Bottom line.
Yeah, well, my husband has been talking, has been down to town hall quite a bit. And
Good.
yeah, so we knew that was coming, that the changes were coming. And that was one of our questions, like, when is that, we were thinking about doing it starting, a breaking ground this fall, but then we're like, oh, well, if we waited, then it would be a lot easier if there, because there's a square footage issue and there's, other things that they're just making it easier. So it was good to hear that it could be as early as January, February to have that just in time for us to pull our permits.
Right.
And be like the test case.
There we go. That's great. Yes. Select board permitting, of course.
Of course, absolutely.
Yeah, so I think that's the plan for the rest of this meeting.
Okay.
Yeah. So just kind of to recap, I know that you didn't get a chance to review the full research plan, but the questions were, what is best about the research plan, what's missing and or would improve it? And then we already talked about the rest of the questions. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I couldn't really contribute to the first question about the research plan. I do see you sent a link, but I can't do anything with it.
Oh,
Yeah, I'm not sure what that is.
that's the. It. I'm gonna try this again. So this is the planning commission
Ah,
page on
okay.
on the website.
Okay.
The website.
Yep.
And go into the meeting 10/14/25 PC ZBM meeting documents. The first one is the research plan. That's the draft that we're looking for input.
Ah, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
got it. Oh, there it is.
Yeah. And Andrew's nice presentation.
Well, nice chatting with you all.
You too. Thank you
Yes,
so much
yes.
for joining us.
I was trying to figure out how the online people could break up into a small group. So I guess technology opens everything up for us.
That's right.
I'm only online because I was like, I didn't think I had the 15 minutes to drive to make, I was running late, so I didn't think I'd be able to make it down there in time.
Well, thank you for coming. I appreciate it.
And I'm in Burlington tonight.
So am I. Well, thank you for coming too, Peg.
Yeah.
And it sounds like people are starting to filter back in.
Okay.
So.
I will go back on mute then.
Yeah, me too. See you there.
Okay. Take myself off video and audio.
All right, thank you all. I can see that most everybody is, mute that computer. Okay, is that done? Good. So I think most of us are still here. Thank you for hanging in. I don't like to keep people later than the time for the meeting. It is 8:30, so we'll try to be rapid fire here, in just providing some feedback. I'm going to ask someone from each group to just give us a summary of the feedback and what was discussed. Some people might have been on track with these questions, and some might not. The conversation may have taken off otherwise, but I'd like to hear back from each group. And I'm going to start with group 1. Jim, who's reporting for group 1? Okay. Oh, and Pip is eating something right now. I put a pear in my mouth. All right. I'm going to actually ask. Ask group 2. Yeah, or 3. Group 3. Andrew. Thank you. Yes.
So some of the topics discussed, there were questions similar to what had been brought up related to specifics. So when will we know, like, what other communities that we're going to use to look at, or that sort of specific? There were some suggestions towards what mechanisms or community mechanisms could exist to conserve forest block land. Is that something that, when we talk about community, could the whole community have a mechanism towards that? And I think there was an emphasis around what kind of actions or policies could be taken that would get people excited about being part of this, and then would that be something that it could start as a voluntary program people could opt into and see how far that got us based upon those who were excited or had opted into it, and then progress from there and see if that sort of, how that created a map. What did that map look like? Did that have the desired effect on our community? There were lots of other things. They're here. They'll go into final edits, but those are some high level.
Great. Thank you, Andrew. Pip, are you feeling like you are able to share with us some high-level sort of feedback from your group?
It's on me, Jim. You're okay. We had a point made that zoning regs have to be thoughtful about taking issues, and that those are important and may have legal ramifications. We went around several times talking about whether development could occur in Putney that would already be under the control of other regulatory agencies like Act 250, or trigger other zoning regs. That led us to think that development scenarios that would sort of test or demonstrate how zoning could be done, what regs might be impacted, what would you have to do if you wanted to see when Act 250 might take effect, what issues would Act 250 address that local zoning wouldn't. So developing those scenarios, I thought, would be a good task. Figuring out some of the data associated with what portions of land are contained within the forest blocks that might be considered valuable, what percentage of them might have some protection already from conservation easements, be part of a nonprofit intended for protection, current use, the existing layers of sort of protection that already exist, so that we have a sense of what lands are vulnerable, and perhaps try to identify the most vulnerable lands and begin to think about what possible impacts they could have. We tried to brainstorm about how getting information and other people engaged. We didn't come up with the magic pill to get everybody in town to come to meetings. There was a suggestion that we could do forced emails of meeting minutes and notes for any attendee of any meeting, making sure that they kept current. I don't know whether, yeah, it's an idea, yeah. Okay, okay. Yeah, so more emails, you know, yeah. Yeah, other town actions, other town actions was high on the list of topics that we thought would be very useful to find out about. What did I miss?
Well, I don't think you missed it, but seeing if there's, doing this assumes that there's a general feeling, or putting into place some kind of forest block regulation assumes that people agree that there's a need for such a thing. And the state has made its case. The state passed legislation. Others have, in the forestry community have said this is important, and the wildlife community have said this is important. I'm not sure that it's generally agreed upon by the public that this is something that needs to be done. And I think part of this process needs to be one which gathers information and distributes information for people to see, so that they can arrive at the conclusion that this is something that needs to be done in some form. And my sense from the group and the groups that I've attended so far is that that's not necessarily a shared consensus.
Great, thank you. So I think that we can hear from the online group. Vanessa, could you please share with us what that discussion was?
Sure. I think that we echoed a lot of the things that have already been said, including having concrete kind of scenarios to explore, thinking about how other towns have completed this process, if they've completed it at all, and how have they assessed the value of the process and the impact on other landowners, and if there's really been enough time to truly assess that kind of impact. And then beyond that, we talked a lot about engagement. We got good feedback from the online folks about these community meetings, that they've been productive and is getting people involved and excited. So they're saying that this is a good way to get folks at least engaged in the process. And that in addition to focusing on landowners that will be impacted or potentially impacted, that village residents also should be engaged too, because there is this issue of, when you're talking about conservation, part of that conservation impacts the village residents as well, and how those issues are interconnected. In terms of continuing to keep people engaged, it was suggested maybe doing like a newsletter or some sort of public mailing, maybe paper and or the email. So that's one way to go about it. It was also suggested to engage the formal and informal neighborhood groups that are around in our community. So I loved that idea. And maybe even exploring how different neighborhoods are impacted by different forest land use policies. And are there other processes or regulations that can allow for the same goals to be achieved? So exploring alternative systems, which I think has already come up as well in this feedback.
Thank you, Vanessa. And I'm going to report out for our group, and I would say that our group basically covered the same ground. A clearer articulation of the problem and how it's felt around town. Is there really a problem to solve? How do we know that? To what degree do existing regulations and policies already provide what we need? Maybe that's why we haven't seen development. Is there something more coming? Is there a different reason why we need to do something more than we're doing? There was a discussion about how to look at it in totality for the town. What does this mean for the village? What is the vision for the village? And housing there, yes, but how's that going to happen? Put some energy into that as well, but also, as you think about the forest block policies, what could they be? Do we need something more? for what reason. We didn't talk a lot about how to get the word out, but I did learn that I know how to get the word out to people with forest block properties. I've got some help on that. Thank you, Jen. And it doesn't have to be a petition. It could actually just be inviting a conversation. I think allowing the range of voices, that's what I heard, that really different kinds of people who have different levels of information, who don't really understand, don't know as much, people who have owned the property, people in just different perspectives, make it relevant to them. So I think we got a lot of the same feedback out of this group, and some also some more specific pieces. I will invite you all to continue to be in conversation with us. We did provide a kind of open-ended participant feedback survey. We hope you will take a few minutes to fill them out. There's a basket right here on this table to put them in. For those of you online, we'll have to send it to you because I wasn't able to get it posted. But we can send that to the people there. Do we have email addresses for the people online? Make sure we have their information so we can put them in the minutes of the meeting for their name, first name and last name. So with that, I want to thank all of you for coming for this conversation. I find it really helpful, even more clear that taking the next number of months to really articulate the need, and based on what needs we identify, what are the solutions beyond what exists already that we might need, and what form might that take, and be kind of open-minded. And I hope you all take back to your communities that we are seriously listening and stepping back. This overlay district proposal was really to put something on the table, and maybe it was a good one to spark everybody to get to the table. That wasn't why we did it, but it certainly did. And we have a very open mind to what might come. But the learning is there, and committed to that, and we hope that you'll be part of it. And do let us know if any of you might want to be on the project advisory committee for this research, because we will be reforming that group in the new year. Okay, with that, I want to adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Next Stage, very much for giving us this facility to use. Get home safely, everybody.